The country's leader addresses illegal migration with leaders of the Caribbean and the Americas.
Maintenance workers of the Ministry of Works are at it again protesting, saying after repeated promises, they've yet to receive their hazardous pay. Find out more in the Bahamas tonight.
And the family of a missing man clinging to hope. The Bahamas Tonight, the National Report, starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Everyday.
Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie addresses the largest summit in the hemisphere for regional leaders. Good evening, everyone. I'm Charisma Robinson.
Good evening. I'm Keisha Latterly. Thanks for joining us. Well, the 7th Summit of the Americas will go down in history as one of the most noted gatherings. The conference brought together leaders of the Americas and the Caribbean to discuss issues of mutual importance and affecting not only the region but the world. Trade, human rights, youth participation, crime, energy, and climate change were some of the topics on the compact schedule. During the final session, Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie addressed the forum. This time, his message focused on the country's most complex issues of migration, crime, and youth. Clint Watson has a recap of that speech.
Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie told the Summit of Americas that the Bahamas makes no apology in the method it has to use to deal with the illegal immigration problem and what it must do to arrest the issue and return those migrants home.
Irregular migration is an existential threat to the Bahamas. And right now, we commit hundreds of millions of dollars to stop this assault on our country. Yet only one side of the story is being told. There must be a balanced approach on this issue. Too often, there is a portrayal on this issue that does not admit to the fact that there is an international, sophisticated criminal enterprise that is driving these irregular migration efforts through the Bahamas. The Bahamas is dedicated to stopping this criminal enterprise before it stops us. I wanted to be clear at this forum how strong we feel on this matter. We will be calling upon all states adjacent to us and in this hemisphere to help to stop this smuggling and trafficking.
Mr. Christie notes that while the human rights of those migrants must be respected, he drew attention to those neighboring states who he says has an obligation to ensure that this law is enforced.
The present trend in illegal migration to and through the Bahamas cannot and must not persist. It is unsustainable. We therefore see a unique opportunity for the region and hemisphere to cooperate on this issue of irregular migration and to facilitate burden sharing on solutions to the challenge. We see dialogue as a necessary first step, particularly through the development of regional consultative mechanisms, and welcome the support of the OAS.
The Prime Minister also addressed regular migration as well, stating that too many of our citizens are leaving our homes to actually help develop other countries, taking the talents out of the home countries.
I speak up for our young people who are our future, but who in too many instances are driven to leave our countries for other shores, taking with them the investments in their education on God-given talents. I have said, and I repeat it, we must focus on eliminating their sense of hopelessness, their joblessness. Because if we fail to do so, if we fail to address it properly, we do so at our peril.
Climate change and development for financing are also key areas addressed by the Prime Minister, but he noted as well his passion, that is youth development, talking particularly about the involvement of young people in crime, speaking to the fact that they are involved in illicit drug trafficking, narcotics. He even went as far as to say in the importation of ammunition and firearms, something he called on the Americas to help the Bahamas address.
Do not manufacture weapons, nor do we form the demand for the drugs that find their way to our shores. Yet again, we are bound by geography to confront these challenges. And while existing regional security cooperation against transnational threats is commendable, greater regional cooperation to mitigate transnational crime in the hemisphere is required, and we endorse the UN Arms Trade Treaty as a potentially valuable tool in these efforts.
This summit has been historic by its very nature. For the very first time, all 35 leaders have gathered, responsible for some 900 million people throughout the Americas. Prime Minister Christie is optimistic that over the coming months, we'll begin to see some tangible change, issues being addressed that have come out of these talks. In Panama City, Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
Thanks so much, Clint. The Summit of the Americas held in Panama over the weekend provided the forum for the historic bilateral talks between the presidents of Cuba and the United States. But back here at home, the Cuban ambassador says he was pleased with the progress both countries are making to lift the decades-old embargo. He tells our Janae Noel Ferguson tonight that there is still more work to be done.
Not possible to have normal relations between the U.S. and Cuba until the embargo will be lifting.
Now, while the Summit of the Americas in Panama City was an historic one for the United States and Cuba, the Cuban ambassador to the Bahamas, His Excellency Ernesto Guzman, says there's still some challenges that the two countries have to work through.
Because people know that if they arrive by illegal means in the U.S., they have those kind of privilege that don't have the rest of the illegal migrants that come from all over around the world. So the question is that because the Cuban migrants are better than the rest of the migrants? It's not. It's because they want, or they have been trying to promote this kind of illegal migration, because at the end of the day they said, okay, look, the Cubans, they come from Cuba, they don't want their country, they don't like the government, so they are abandoning the country, and it is a political tool.
The Cuban ambassador referenced the wet foot, dry foot policy of the United States. Anyone who fled Cuba and entered the United States would be allowed to pursue residency a year later. Now, Ambassador Guzman says this also has an impact on the Bahamas as Cubans enter Bahamian waters in an attempt to reach the United States. Some Cuban nationals who entered the Bahamas illegally are currently in prison here, and in protest, they recently wired their mouths shut. The ambassador spoke to this issue, saying that addressing the law with the U.S. could help the migration problem.
They didn't arrive from Cuba. They arrived from a third country, in this case the U.S., so they're supposed to be repatriated to the U.S. This is another thing that we have to fix between Cuba and the U.S.
And according to Guzman, the challenges don't end there.
We hope that they will remove Cuba from the list of the states that sponsor terrorists. Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, this is a part of our territory, and right now it's a territory that is occupied by the U.S. because it's not possible to have normal relations if you occupied part of my territory.
Although U.S. President Barack Obama has discussed the possibility of that embargo lifted, the decision is not his alone to make. Guzman says lifting the embargo can also have economic benefits for the Bahamas, linking with Cuba as a multi-country destination. It's a story we'll bring to you in a later report. Janae Noel Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Bradley Roberts has taken issue with the analysis of an Inter-American Development Bank survey polling Bahamians on public sentiment toward the government. The survey took place between June and October of last year. Mr. Roberts says his initial observation was that about 47% of Bahamians surveyed believe that Prime Minister Christie is either performing good, according to the survey, or very good. He compared the rating to that of United States President Barack Obama and his jobs approval rating of 47%, which is reported as good in the American press. Mr. Roberts further concludes that 32.2% of Bahamians surveyed graded Mr. Christie's performance as fair, and that when added to the grades of good and very good, the Prime Minister ended up with his rating was capitulated to 79.1%. Mr. Roberts says in light of the customary midterm blues among voters, these results are good news for Mr. Christie and the PLP government and bad news for Hubert Minnis and the opposition. Mr. Roberts says his final observation is that the constant negative messaging from the usual suspects isn't having the kind of negative impact that these purveyors of, quote, gloom and doom had hoped for.
Coming up, the countdown continues to the IAAF Games.
And authorities need your help in finding a murder suspect. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Lux Men's Warehouse.